Hello, Cobbers. I'm Michael Kenfield, Assistant Dean of Students and Director of Residence Life, here with what I will try to make a short video about returning student housing sign up. I know folks are starting to think about next year already, and this is a great time to start talking about sign up. So what are we going to cover? We are going to talk through who is required to live on campus, what does the overall timeline look like, what's the application like, roommate and room selection, where can I live, how much does it cost, and we'll go over a couple of frequently asked questions. So first, who is required to live on campus? Great question. So Concordia has a 2-year live-on requirement. You'll sometimes see it written as a 4-semester live-on requirement. What does this mean for you? It means if you're watching this video and this is your first year at Concordia right now, you should plan to live on campus next year. If you're currently a second-year student or third-year student, we'd love to have you continue staying on campus, and we hope that you'll fill out an application and sign up. But especially if you're a first-year student, make sure that you are required to live on. Do note that credits are not considered when we look at that 2-year live-on requirement. So if you're a first-year student, but you already have sophomore standing by credits, we only look at how many years you've been at Concordia. If you're interested in what it looks like to request an exemption to that live-on requirement, we'll be doing another video, an info video that we'll put on My Housing that talks about that process. The form to request an exemption from needing to live on as a second-year student will be available towards the end of January, early February, but please do still apply for housing. It's rare for students to be approved to live off campus, so please do plan to live on if you're currently a first-year student. All right, what does the housing sign-up timeline look like? Well, the first thing is to fill out the application, and it will be available starting January 24th. And then we have 2 different deadlines to submit that application depending on the type of building you're looking for. So if you want to try to sign up for the townhouses or any of the living learning communities, such as the sexuality and gender inclusion floor or the multicultural living community, you'll want to make sure you submit your returning student housing application by February 13th. If you're not interested in any of those options, you just want to look at the other apartment buildings or the returning student floors in the dorms, make sure you have your application in by March 1st. So after you've submitted your application, what's the timeline look like? If you are trying to sign up for a townhouse, you will do that selection in February 17th and 18th. If you indicated that you were interested in living in a living learning community of any kind, you'll be notified by March 7th if you've been accepted, and you'll be able to get that housing set up. And then for everybody else who's just looking at signing up for a room in a traditional, apartment building on campus or dorm on campus, all of those room selections will happen mid-March to the end of March. Wanted to also highlight that we do have additional what are called open room change processes. Those happen late in the spring and over the course of the summer, where you can move rooms to a room that you are more interested in case it became available. Okay, so that was the timeline. The first thing you need to do is submit the application. What does the application process look like? The good news is it's really short. So where do you find it? The housing application is located on the My Housing portal. I threw a tiny URL up there. You can also find it from our Residence Life website on the Concordia website. Once you're logged into My Housing, you will just click on Applications and Forms and then select the returning student housing application. And you'll have fall 2022 after it, so you know you have the right one. The first part of the application, once you click on it, is just some information about the process that you'll read through, and then you do need to sign to continue on to the next part, the second part of the application, which is the actual application, and it's really short. If you remember signing up for housing or submitting your housing application as an incoming student to Concordia, we asked you a lot of questions about building preferences, what your living habits were like. The returning student application is much shorter. You'll verify your phone number, your preferred name, and this is where you'll mark if you're interested in signing up for the townhouses or any other living learning communities like the sexuality and gender inclusion floor, multicultural living community. You'll check boxes there. And then you can also check a box that indicates if you're interested in using My Housing to look for potential roommates. If you click that box, you'll then fill out a couple of things about roommate preferences, kind of like lifestyle questions that you'll be able to filter as you look for potential roommates. If you don't check that box, you don't answer those questions, that's an even shorter application. And then it'll take you to the final part, which is just submitting or updating your emergency contact information. And then you'll have officially submitted your returning student housing application. If on the application you marked that you were interested in trying to sign up for the townhouses or any of those other living learning communities, you will then have access to fill out those additional applications. So don't forget that step, fill out those short applications and you'll be all set to go. Roommate and room selection. We're going to talk briefly about that because our housing sign up process has two parts: roommate selection followed by room selection. The reason roommate selection is an important part of the process is because for almost all of our housing sign up, you're required to have what's called occupancy match to select a space, which means if you're matched up with one person, you and your roommate, when you go to select a room, will only be able to see double rooms or double apartments. So it's really important to think through how that might impact the space that you're trying to get into. If you really want to be in the Bogstead East apartments, most of those are 4-person apartments. So think about those roommate pairings or matches accordingly. As I'd mentioned, you'll use My Housing to match up with your roommates. You won't be able to do that until just a few days before your room selection time. So for folks who are just interested in that sort of general sign up for the apartments, for the traditional dorms, it won't happen until March. So no stress to worry about it now. You'll get a lot more information later. As I had also mentioned, if you're not sure who you want to live with, you will have the opportunity to log into My Housing closer to room selection time and search for potential roommates and contact them and see if you'd be a good fit. A thing to note is the person with the best selection time picks the room or apartment for the whole group. And those room selection times are assigned based on how many semesters you've been in college and then how many credits you have. So if you're matched up with someone who's going to be a senior next year and you're only going to be a second-year student, the senior you're living with is going to have the best selection time. So they should definitely be the one to be picking your room. But don't worry, you'll get a lot more information as we get closer to the actual roommate and room selection periods of housing sign up. Good question about where can you live? How much does it cost? Those are very, very good questions to be wondering about. A great spot to go is just simply to our Residence Life website on the main Concordia page. We have pages for all of our residence halls so you can see pictures, floor plans, those kinds of things. We'll also, closer to room selection, put a list up on My Housing that lists in much more detail which floors in certain dorms will be set for returners, what kinds of spaces that are available, how many townhouse apartments are there, all of those things. We want to give you as much information as we can. But in general, as a returning student next year, you'll be able to sign up to live in the townhouses. Keep in mind, townhouses are our only option on campus that has a true lease. It's a 12-month lease, and everyone who lives there who's matched up together has to agree to a 12-month lease. It goes from May to May. We'll put more information up about townhouse signups. You can read that if you're interested. Other options for returning students are any of the apartment units in the Bogstead or Bo Olson apartments. I'll be honest, we're still not sure if we need to be holding quarantine space for next year, but we are cautiously optimistic that most of our apartment spaces will be able to be used for regular student housing. Fjellstead is a great building with 2 full floors, all for returning students, as well as the multicultural living community. Fjellstead is a little bit different in that all of the bathrooms have been recently renovated. They're assigned, some are single gender and some are gender neutral bathrooms, and there's a kitchen on every floor. And we also have floors for returning students in East Complex. That would be Hallett, Erickson, as well as Lived Allen and Park Region. You will note that Hoyam is not on this list. For next year, we're actually not going to be using Hoyam for student housing. We're using this opportunity with our current on-campus numbers to sort of hold off on Hoyam, which will allow us to divert some resources to preparing for renovating Brown and some other necessary and good hall improvements in the other buildings. Couple of frequently asked questions. What if I was studying abroad? Don't worry, we've got you covered. We usually tell students who are studying abroad, graduating early, or otherwise need housing just for one semester to apply for housing and sign up with your roommate or roommates or for a single room like you normally would. You simply then email Residence Life after you've selected your space and let us know which semester you don't need the housing, and we'll take you out and hold it for the other semester for you. So pretty easy. What if I want a single? Great question. I know a lot of students really desire single occupancy spaces. We do have some singles, true singles across campus. We also will reserve some doubles as singles that you'll be able to sign up for. But just know that often demand exceeds what we have available. Related to the single question, we do, like I said, typically prioritize most of our room selection as occupancy match. But as we get towards the end of room selection, towards the last couple of days, we do take that requirement away. And then it's kind of a free-for-all. And so at that point, if you haven't selected a space yet and there's a double room and you're able to pick a bed in there, if at the end of selection, there's nobody else in there, you may be given the opportunity to buy that space out. So a couple of different ways to approach it. What if I signed up during room selection? I selected a space, my roommate and I did, or I did, and I don't like the room that we got. Totally understandable. The good thing to keep in mind, though, is that we have several open room change processes. Those happen late spring over the course of the summer. And rooms will become available, apartments will become available. Students will decide that they are transferring, or maybe a junior realizes they're actually going to live off campus. So they cancel their on-campus housing. So things do change and more spaces will be put into the inventory, as we call it. And you can log in during those open room change processes and see if there's anything you'd like to move into. And then our favorite question, what are my chances of getting a townhouse? What are my chances of getting a single in Fjellstead? What are my chances of, and then like insert your interest here. Those are really good questions. And unfortunately, there's no good way to give you a concrete answer like 42% or 90%, because it involves so many factors. So we'll try to give you as much information as we can about all the spaces that are available. And then it's a little bit of recognizing that so much of whether a space will be available to you is just on what the folks who had better selection times, what their preferences were. And so it's a really great question. And I wish we could give you a better answer than it depends. Some key takeaways. If you're like me, you've zoned out at some point and you just need the but what do I actually need to know? Key takeaways, submit your housing application. Even if you're not sure if you're going to live on campus next year, submit your housing application. There's no penalty for submitting an application. And then if you end up transferring or living off campus or something happens, right? No worries, just get the housing application in. Submit the housing application by the February 13th if you're interested in trying to sign up for the townhouses or interested in being in a living learning community, or get it in by March 1st if you're interested in just any of the other sort of general apartment buildings or returning student options. Once you've applied, make sure you read your Concordia email. I think most folks are really actually pretty good about that, because that's where we'll send you all of your information about how to do roommate selection and room selection. Also keep an eye on My Housing. We'll continue putting up video tutorials and other informational pieces that you can look through. If you need a special housing accommodation, if you need a single for medical reasons, if you need air conditioning, if you need access to a kitchen, make sure you've met with Matt Rutten by February 15th to get approved, because you'll actually get to sign up for housing early. So please do that ASAP. And then that reminder that even if you don't like the room that you picked, you have other options throughout the spring and summer to potentially move to different spaces as many times as you want through those open room changes. Where you live is a big deal. So I very much understand the anxiety that can come from it. So it helps to keep in mind that it's an ongoing process, that it's not done in March. That's just the first phase of it. And then there are other opportunities throughout the spring and the summer. Finally, contact us. We know that this is, for many of you, a new experience, but we are here to help. So after you watch this video, if there's still things you're not sure about, make sure to send us an email, give us a call, or stop by Academy, and we would be happy to assist you. Thank you so much for your attention. Hopefully this was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you all on campus next year with the housing that you select.